So you asked why I got politically active to
Yeah,
begin with?
yeah.
And I guess it goes way back to about 7th or 8th grade, I think, when the Vietnam War was going on and the civil rights movement was bubbling up. Some of the answers were so clear and it was so simple, and all we had to do was get more involved. And I remember going to some anti-war marches and protests back then. I remember Kent State, I remember the bombing of Cambodia and those things. So that's when I got started and decided, oh, we should be active and involved. I also remember how it seemed at that time how it really was so simple and it was so clear, you know, okay, peace is good, racism and discrimination are bad, we have to take care of the environment, women should have equal rights with men. Okay, now we know the answer, so let's get about changing, you know, the establishment, our society, or the world.
And how old were you at that time?
13, 14, 15. And it kind of went a little bit of that. In high school, I was doing little things like against the draft and those little protests or letters to the editor and those kinds of things. At least the draft ended. We got some progress in some areas, you know, but it still seems like the same ideas are good, and it's not that easy to implement them all the time. Or it's become a longer, bigger job than I thought it was going to be.
And obviously it's several decades between starting thinking as an activist to actually getting into doing government. Over those ensuing years, when did you come to a point where you actually thought that you wanted to run for office compared to just continuing to do that other kind of activist work, and why? What flipped it for you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question too, because it wasn't that I was always focused on activism all those years either. I mean, I started a family and I got a job and career and played music and did other things. And it wasn't until early 90s, I guess, that I got more involved in politics. I guess it was 88, 89. I remember when Jesse Jackson ran for president, and then I was going to the Democratic caucuses and getting involved there. And Jerry Brown ran. I think I was a state delegate, so I was kind of trying to play a role there and influence those decisions. And then when the Greens were starting in Minnesota in 1994, I got involved at the beginning of that and went to some of the early meetings, and then I was on the founding coordinating committee for the Green Party. One of the things we started then was candidate recruitment. And we started to look at how can we get some candidates to run, because now we've decided to be a political party. And so I was on the candidate recruitment committee, and we finished writing our platform, I guess, and we thought we're ready now, we have to run some people for office. And it was hard to, we'd go through lists of names of people we thought might be famous or good activists and try to get them to do it. There was this waiting game, and I remember thinking, if we don't do something in a few years, I'll get tired of this, and I won't want to be involved, and this won't be an avenue for me. And then there was sort of a revelation where I had, well, I think one of us is going to have to run for office, and that's really, it's going to have to come from within. And I think some other people have talked about how other movements and things, somebody from within the organization usually has to start. So I actually decided to run in '96. And I didn't really know what I was doing that well, and I picked the House seat because it seemed like the smallest district, and it would be the easiest to campaign.
State House?
State House. And that's what I ran for in 1996, and that's the same year that Nader and Leduc ran, and actually had a pretty good showing, so that was good, but I think I got 24% or something like that. And I think Minnesota was pretty interested in alternative parties, and I was running against an entrenched incumbent who probably had a 24% anybody but him group by then, because he'd been in office so long. But it's very hard to beat, you know. So, not that I ran that good of a campaign either, because we didn't really know what we were doing. We did a few lit pieces. And it was good practice for us, so, and good practice for me. It took me a while then to get elected.
How did it change you to start going door to door and thinking you had all these simple issue solutions to life, and then started going to door and talking to people who weren't activists?
It was eye-opening. Actually, going to door was really hard for me at the beginning. because I think I grew up in a family and you didn't go visit people unless you were invited or something, and I think I was also, and am somewhat shy and am just fine on my own. So that was a really hard part for me, to go out door to door. And people weren't, some areas weren't that interested in talking, and people's lives are so different and detached from politics. Usually they're not thinking about the issues or even the election. And so it actually took me till the last campaign to really get comfortable going door to door, to understand how to do it, and how to talk and how to listen and not feel totally self-conscious, and also how to do it in a methodical way where I've got a list of who the voters are, I'm keeping track, and I'm IDing, and so that first campaign was stumbling along and barely knowing what to say and just introducing myself. We did have positions and issues, and healthcare was a big one because we were pushing for a better approach to that, and universal single-payer healthcare plan, because the incumbent had kind of crafted the HMO. It was a big part of his thing, working with the insurance industry and having that kind of managed care model that we have now in Minnesota. He helped create, and I was trying to take that on.
And how much, when you're going door to door, did your green identity play into your interaction?
Well, it played in a lot, partly what I was trying to do was play up the Green Party endorsement. And I also think I was trying to you can make history now, we're going to open things up. And, so I played that up every time I ran, and actually took me 3 tries to get into city council. So after I ran for the state rep, I ran for city council in 2001, and then I ran again in 2005.
You came close in 2001.
I did. Within 100. I can't remember exactly what it was, but 2001 was pretty exciting because there was an incumbent there, and we have a runoff primary here, and so she was challenged also within her own party. She got the endorsement, but somebody kept running to the primary, and I also kept running hard to the primary, so there were the 3 of us, and she ended up coming in 3rd, so the incumbent lost in the primary, and then I lost by 70 votes or something like that in the general election, and almost over geography, because the ward is divided up by the Mississippi River, and I was from one side of the ward, well known in the Seward neighborhood, and I was willing to win those, or able to win those precincts. I was willing to win them all, but then I wasn't able where he was known, and he'd been very active in his community in the Prospect Park area on the other side of the river, where there's a high voter turnout too, and he won that.
So describe a little bit more about the district for people who are from Minneapolis.
Sure. This is just on all perspectives, it's a very diverse ward or district. The University of Minnesota sits in the middle, and so then there's lots of young students who live in a lot of the neighborhoods, but also the Mississippi River runs through it. So you've also got some very affluent neighborhoods with some very big houses along the river, because that's prime area. There's also big industrial areas in the ward, both along old rail corridors, and actually both of them. And there's one near the University of Minnesota where there's big rail corridors and grain elevators, and there's been industrial there for years, and then there's another one in another part of the area. And also closer to those then is more working class, poorer housing. There's also some subsidized public housing, some big high rises, so economically it's very diverse. Cedar Riverside, one of our neighborhoods, which is on the west bank of the river, is the poorest neighborhood, mostly because of all the public housing and subsidized housing, but it's the poorest neighborhood with the highest unemployment rate of any neighborhood in the city. And it also has one of the highest concentration of new immigrants, because it's kind of a place where because of the subsidized housing and public housing, it's been a sort of a different immigrant group has moved in, and then they get settled in, and then they move out. And right now there's a high concentration of Somali immigrants that live in that area.
It's a remarkably diverse district. I mean, the ranges that you're talking about.
It is, compared to other areas in the city where it's almost all residential, some of them, and it's all middle class, or it's all upper class, or that. This is very different. And I learned that more after I got elected and kind of talking to my colleagues and learning more about the whole city. And I think there are similar, maybe some similarities with some of the other boards, but I think it's the most diverse part of the city.
So you must have had a very different message depending on the different parts of the district you were campaigning in.
Well, maybe I did, but it seemed like it was pretty consistent, though, across the board. In fact, at least the last time when I ran, most recently, when I actually had more of a clear message and clear approach. And I ran very much on the pillars of the Green Party. And what I did is I even put democracy, ecology, peace, and justice on all my campaign lit, and I even translated it into like 5 languages. So that was a little tagline on there. So it's sort of the same message, but I was also making a call that we can be inclusive, and that was sort of my message. We're going to be inclusive. And my sort of the tagline we developed, because one of the things we wanted to do was, well, if we could just give a message in a sentence about what sort of the theme of this people could grab onto, at least for most of the campaign, bringing people together for a better city. So it's really simple and it's really basic, but it was also saying we're going to be inclusive and bring people in. And we have some guiding principles that we all agree on, commonality, because people, they could relate to those principles, and also the fact that I would say, here's the filter, through which I'm going to base my decisions, and these are some principles, and you should know what they are up front. And it was great because they're also the Green Party principles, and I'm building the party, but I'm, of course, in the party because I agree with them and align with them, and a lot of people in the ward did too. And then we could also formulate just bullet points off of some of those themes too. And the democracy one was able to turn it very much involve the community and get people connected better to their government, because a lot of people, whether they're rich or poor or whatever, feel disconnected. I think that's great, and they want to be included too. And the environment's a big issue. People want to think about having a walkable, good city that's clean air and clean water for the future. So a lot of those issues resonated well. And some of it, of course, is just letting people know you're going to listen, you're going to be fair, you're going to be open, and you're thoughtful enough and smart enough that they can trust you. I'm sorry about that.
Why did you win?
I don't know. That's a good question. It was also a very close victory. I think it was about 160 votes, and I may be off. It was over 140, I think it was. 140 votes that I won by. And some of it maybe had to do with both of the race ended up between 2 people who were in the Seward area, so we were competing over the same area. And I also focused a lot in neighborhoods where I wasn't as well known, but quite honestly because I'd run before. And also between one election and the next, I also served on a neighborhood revitalization policy board, which was sort of a citywide board, but it gave me an opportunity to go to some neighborhoods throughout the ward and communicate with them and work on that. And I also served on an ethics task force that the mayor appointed me to. So after the election, he had seen, here's somebody who might be useful. I'm going to see if I can appoint him into this task force. And so I had some of those credentials, and that might have helped. I think it helped a lot going door to door, talking to people, listening, and they could compare the 2 candidates. And maybe just think about who do I want to be representing me in the city council. So it's really hard to know. One of the things I think is different voters make their decision based on so many different things. It's really so hard to predict. We did get the Star Tribune endorsement, which really helped because that's kind of establishment. That's the big local paper. And so a lot of people who were saying, wow, this Green Party guy who's way out there, you know, is he really credible, or is he going to be dependable? Is it realistic to think he can handle this job? And then to have that sort of established paper, more, you know, conservative, you know, that wasn't one of our fringe lefty papers or anything, say he's the right man for the job was a big thing, so of course we copied those and publicized that. And I think in some parts of the ward with a better-to-do, higher educated population who vote all the time, that made a big difference. In fact, some people told me that on the door as I saw that. You know, they were thinking of voting for me and having trouble. They saw that editorial and it really made sense. And so that, I think, really helped. You know, in some ways, the Green Party might have helped because people, I think, want to see it as there's more parties in the city.